It started, as most suburban declarations of war do, with a beige envelope. Not threatening manila, not cheerful greeting card white, but beige. The color of compromise, the color of a sensible sedan, the color of a soul that has quietly given up. I should have known. I was standing at my mailbox, doing the daily shuffle of junk mail diplomacy. Here's a coupon for 10% off a gutter cleaning service I'll never use. Into the recycling pile you go. Here's a credit card offer with an interest rate that would make a loan shark blush, straight to the shredder. Here's a flyer for a psychic who can apparently tell me my future, but couldn't predict that I would immediately use her face to line the bottom of the birdcage. It was a normal Tuesday. And then I saw it. Tucked between a catalog for tactical garden gnomes and a letter addressed to a person who died 3 years ago, was the beige envelope of doom. It had no stamp, meaning it was hand-delivered, a level of passive-aggressive effort that sent a shiver down my spine. The return address simply read, Harmony Meadows Homeowners Association. My stomach clenched. You know the feeling. It's not a bill, because those come with a clear plastic window showing you exactly how much of your soul you owe this month. It's not a birthday card, because my family uses Facebook for that, usually a week late. No, this envelope had the texture of recycled disappointment and smelled faintly of lavender-scented tyranny. It was a letter from our HOA president, Brenda, a woman who wielded a binder of bylaws with the grim certainty of a medieval inquisitor. I walked back up my driveway, the offending letter held between my thumb and forefinger as if it were radioactive. And maybe it was. My driveway, I should mention, was less a pristine slab of concrete and more a topographical map of my life. There was the long, snaking crack from the brutal winter of '09. A network of smaller fissures near the garage from the time the Amazon guy dropped a ridiculously heavy cat tree he clearly resented having to deliver. A pockmark where my daughter, Chloe, had dropped a hammer while building a birdhouse that looked more like a crime scene. It wasn't pretty, but it was mine. It had character. Inside, I poured a coffee, sat at the kitchen table, and took a deep breath. I slit the envelope open with a butter knife, a small act of domestic defiance. The letter was a single, crisply folded page. Subject: Notice of Violation. Bylaw 7, Section 4, Paragraph C. Dear resident of 124 Blossom Lane. This letter serves as a friendly reminder regarding the Harmony Meadows Community Standards of Excellence. It has come to the attention of the Architectural Review Committee that the pavement surface of your driveway exhibits a degree of degradation inconsistent with our shared vision for aesthetic uniformity. Specifically, the surface presents with excessive and unsightly fissures and fractures. As per Bylaw 7, Section 4, Paragraph C, all visible exterior surfaces, including but not limited to driveways, walkways, and patios, must be maintained in a state of good repair, free from significant cracks, stains, or chipping that detract from the harmonious appearance of the community. You are hereby requested to rectify the situation within 30 days of the date of this notice. Failure to comply will result in further action, including potential fines. We appreciate your cooperation in maintaining the beauty and value of our wonderful community. Sincerely, Brenda McManus, President, Harmony Meadows, HOA. I read it twice. Excessive and unsightly fissures. She made it sound like my driveway had a terminal disease. Rectify the situation. The kind of vague corporate jargon that means spend a lot of money so I don't have to look at your life's imperfections anymore. My first instinct, the one that bubbles up from the petty, primordial soup of my soul, was to buy a bag of multicolored glitter and fill every single crack with it. But then the responsible adult part of my brain, a small, squeaky-voiced creature that rarely wins arguments, suggested I should at least try to be compliant. So, I started the contractor circus. First up was Dave, from Dave's Dependable Paving. The name sounded solid. Dave was not. He was a tall, gangly man who looked like he'd been assembled from spare parts and was held together by drywall dust and cynicism. He pulled up in a pickup truck that had clearly lost a fight with a bigger pickup truck, took one look at my driveway, and kicked it with his steel-toed boot. A few more crumbs of concrete broke loose. "Yep," he grunted, chewing on a toothpick that looked like it had been with him since the Clinton administration. "She's cracked." "A stunning diagnosis, Dave," I said. "You're the Sherlock Holmes of asphalt." He didn't smile. I don't think the muscles in his face knew how. "Look, kid, here's the deal. We can patch it. Slap some of that tar crap in there. It'll look like a Frankenstein driveway. All black lines on gray. The HOA will probably have a conniption about that next." "So what's the alternative?" I asked, dreading the answer. "Re-pour the whole slab. Jackhammer this old mess out, lay down new rebar, pour you a fresh 4 inches. That's the only way to do it, right?" He squinted at the sky, doing some complex mental calculation that probably involved the price of concrete, the weakness of my spirit, and the current phase of the moon. "That'll be, let's say, 12 grand. I must have made a sound like a deflating balloon. 12 grand? For that much money, I could hire a team of geologists to convince the HOA that the cracks were a rare, protected geological formation. I'll get back to you, Dave." He just shrugged, climbed back into his wounded truck, and rattled away, leaving me alone with my $12,000 problem. Next was Chad from Prestige Pavement Solutions. Chad was the polar opposite of Dave. He arrived in a gleaming white truck with a logo that looked like a mountain peak made of diamonds. He wore a crisp polo shirt, khaki shorts, and boat shoes, an outfit that screamed, "I'm about to charge you more than your car is worth." He didn't carry a clipboard. He carried an iPad. He didn't kick my driveway. He scanned it. "Okay, Leo, let's talk foundational synergy," he began, swiping through photos on his tablet. "What we're seeing here isn't just surface-level degradation. It's a narrative of foundational distress. It's a narrative of me being broke, Chad." He gave a tight, professional smile. "I hear you. But what we offer isn't just a repair. It's a curb appeal optimization. We can re-pour, of course. But have you considered our stamped cobblestone pattern? Or perhaps our flagship aggregate concrete with integrated radiant heating? You'll never have to shovel snow again." "I live in a state that gets snow once every 5 years, Chad. And usually it's just a light, apologetic dusting." "It's about being prepared," he said, tapping on his iPad. "So, for a full premium re-pour, with our Prestige Seal to TM, 5-year warranty, you're looking at $15,000. The heated option would be a bit more." I thanked him, my voice a hollow echo of its former self. He left me a glossy brochure filled with pictures of driveways more beautiful than most national parks. I used it as a coaster for my now cold coffee. That night, I sat in the dark, bathed in the blue glow of my laptop screen. Dejected, furious, and broke, I fell down the internet rabbit hole. Cheap driveway crack repair. DIY concrete filler. How to convince HOA your driveway is rustic charm. Nothing. It was all ugly patches and expensive solutions. Then, around 2 a.m., somewhere between a video of a guy making a knife out of old ramen noodles and an article about the history of the spork, I stumbled upon it. A link to an art blog. The headline was, Kintsugi, the Art of Precious Scars. I clicked. I saw a photo of a beautiful ceramic bowl, shattered and broken, but put back together. The cracks weren't hidden. They were the main feature, filled with shimmering gold lacquer. The article explained the philosophy behind it. An object is more beautiful for having been broken. The damage is part of its history, something to be celebrated, not disguised. Wabi-sabi. Finding beauty in imperfection. I looked from the glowing screen to the dark outline of my driveway through the window. The cracks, the fissures, the imperfections. Brenda's words echoed in my head. Unsightly. Detract from the harmonious appearance. She wanted me to hide them, to pave over the history written in my driveway, the story of my life here, and replace it with a flat, soulless, uniform gray. A slow, malicious, and utterly brilliant grin spread across my face. What if I didn't hide the cracks? What if I celebrated them? What if I made every single crack, every fissure, every pockmark a glittering golden middle finger pointed directly at Bylaw 7, Section 4, Paragraph C? Oh, Brenda, you have no idea what you've just started. The next morning, I woke up with a renewed sense of purpose. My mission was no longer about compliance. It was about glorious, artistic, and exquisitely petty revenge. The problem was, how do you find someone who does ancient Japanese pottery repair on an industrial scale? It's not exactly a category on Angie's list. My day became a blur of phone calls, each more absurd than the last. I started with local art schools, figuring they'd be my best bet. "Hello, ceramics department?" I said into the phone, trying to sound sane. "I have a somewhat unusual commission inquiry. Do you have any students or faculty who specialize in Kintsugi?" "Kintsugi?" the voice on the other end said, sounding like a teenager who was deeply unimpressed. "Like, with the gold and stuff? For pottery?" "Exactly, except not for pottery." "Okay. A sculpture?" "Sort of. A very, very flat, very large sculpture. That I park my car on." There was a long pause. "You want someone to Kintsugi your driveway?" "Yes, that's it exactly." Click. The second call, to a high-end art restoration gallery, was even better. The woman on the phone had a voice so posh it probably had its own trust fund. "Good afternoon, Sterling Art Restoration. How may I direct your call?" "Hi. Yes, I'm looking for a Kintsugi artist." "Certainly. We have a master craftsman we work with for Edo period ceramics. May I ask about the piece, its provenance?" "The provenance is Bob's Discount Concrete, circa 2004. It's a driveway." I heard a sound that might have been a gasp, or perhaps she just choked on a tiny, artisanal cucumber sandwich. "Sir, we are a fine art restoration studio. We do not do pavement." The way she said pavement made it sound like a foul curse. I tried pottery studios. I tried sculptors. I tried avant-garde artists I found on Instagram. The reactions ranged from confused silence to outright laughter. "How big is the piece?" one artist asked, sounding intrigued for a moment. "About 600 square feet," I said. I heard him take a sharp drag from what was probably a hand-rolled cigarette. "Dude," he said, and I could practically feel the cloud of smoke through the phone. "That's not Kintsugi. That's a federal infrastructure project." By late afternoon, I was ready to give up. My dream of a golden monument to spite was fading. I slumped in my chair, scrolling half-heartedly through search results for weird artists who work with weird materials. And then I saw it. Buried on the 5th page of Google, a link that looked like it was designed in 1998. The title was simple: Anya Petrova, Wabi-Sabi Restoration. The website was minimalist to the extreme. A white background, black text, and a handful of high-resolution photos of beautifully repaired ceramics. A teacup with a delicate touane, gold seam. A platter with a spider web of silver. There were no pictures of the artist, no long-winded biography. Just a short paragraph. There is no true break, only a new path. We honor the journey of the object by illuminating its story. At the bottom was a simple contact form. With nothing left to lose, I typed a desperate, rambling message. Subject: a very, very large piece of pottery. Hello, I know this is going to sound insane, but I'm looking for someone to perform Kintsugi on my concrete driveway. The local homeowners association has declared it a public menace due to its unsightly fissures, and rather than pave over its history, I want to highlight it. I want to make it a testament to imperfection. I want to fill the cracks with gold. If you are the person who can help me wage this beautiful, stupid war, please let me know. Sincerely, Leo. 124 Blossom Lane. I hit send and leaned back, expecting nothing. 5 minutes later, my phone pinged with a new email. My heart leaped. From Anya Petrova. Subject: a very, very large piece of pottery. Leo. An intriguing proposition. The spirit of the object does not discriminate based on material. The principles of wabi-sabi apply to all things that experience the entropy of time. I will be there for a consultation tomorrow at 10 a.m. Please do not sweep the cracks. I must see their story as it is. Anya. That was it? No questions, no mockery, just acceptance and a strange, poetic command. I felt like I had just summoned a mythical creature. The next morning at precisely 10 a.m., a small, dark blue electric car pulled silently into my cracked, imperfect cul-de-sac. A woman emerged. I was expecting someone old and wizened, maybe with clay under her fingernails, and a faraway look in her eyes. Anya Petrova was not that. She was probably in her late 30s, with sharp, intelligent eyes that seemed to see right through you. She had dark hair pulled back in a severe bun and wore simple black clothes. She moved with a quiet, deliberate purpose that made me, in my rumpled t-shirt and cargo shorts, feel like a rampaging bull in a china shop. "You are Leo," she stated. It wasn't a question. "I am. You must be Anya." She gave a slight nod, and her gaze immediately went past me to the driveway. A flicker of something. Curiosity? Respect crossed her face. "Yes," she murmured, more to herself than to me. "It has a story." She walked onto the concrete, and I followed, feeling like a nervous student trailing a stern professor. She didn't just look at the driveway, she studied it. She knelt down, her black trousers brushing against the dusty gray surface, and traced the largest fissure with a single, elegant finger. "This one," she said, her voice low and calm. "It tells a story of a heavy winter, the freeze-thaw cycle, a struggle against the elements. It is a scar of resilience." "Yeah, or the time the Amazon guy dropped that ridiculously heavy cat tree on it," I offered. Anya looked up, at me, her expression unreadable. The cat tree was merely the catalyst. The weakness was already there, waiting to express itself. She moved to another section, a starburst of tiny cracks. And this? A sudden, sharp trauma. Chloe, my daughter, dropped a hammer. A moment of creation led to a moment of destruction. Poetic, she said, completely deadpan. She spent another 10 minutes in silence, walking the length of the driveway, occasionally crouching to examine a particular spot. I just stood there, hands in my pockets, feeling increasingly like I had invited a concrete whisperer to my home. Finally, she stood up and faced me. The cracks have good character, strong lines. They will take the lacquer well. Right, lacquer, I said, my voice suddenly shaky with hope. So you can, gold it up? Anya's brow furrowed slightly, the first sign of any emotion I'd seen from her. This is not about golding it up, Leo. It is about honoring the journey of this surface. We will not be hiding the damage. We will be illuminating it. The process is meticulous. First, the cracks must be cleaned with the utmost care. Then, they are sealed with layers of urushi lacquer, a natural resin. This takes time to cure. Only then can we apply the final layer, mixed with powdered gold. Urushi, got it. Sounds serious. It is, she said. The material will be 23-carat gold leaf, suspended in the lacquer. The cost will be significant. She named a number. It was a number that made contractor Dave's 12 grand look like pocket change. It was a number that made contractor Chad's 15 grand seem like a bargain. It was a number that could have bought me a decent used car or a very, very nice vacation. My jaw went slack. The responsible adult in my brain screamed, fainted, and then had a tiny aneurysm. I looked at the number she had written down on a small card. Then I looked past her, across the street, to Brenda McManus's house. Her lawn was a perfect, uniform green carpet. Her beige siding was spotless. Her driveway was a smooth, unblemished, soul-crushingly perfect expanse of gray. I looked back at Anya. The spiteful, creative part of my brain drop-kicked the responsible adult into a ditch and took over the controls. Anya, I said, a wide grin spreading across my face. Let's make this driveway so beautiful it causes a traffic jam. When do you start? The following Monday, Operation Golden Veins commenced. I expected a construction crew, maybe a small van with a logo. Instead, Anya arrived in her silent electric car, followed by a nondescript panel truck. From it emerged a single young man, her apprentice, who was as silent and focused as she was. They didn't speak to each other. They seemed to communicate via a series of minute nods and shared brainwaves. There were no jackhammers, no cement mixers, no loud shouts or blaring radios. Their equipment looked like it belonged in a dental office or a museum restoration lab. They unloaded small tool kits filled with things I couldn't identify. Delicate metal picks, brushes with bristles so fine they were almost invisible. Small, powerful air compressors with precision nozzles and cans of mysterious liquids. I sat on my front porch with a mug of coffee, ready to supervise. But there was nothing to supervise. It was like watching a very slow, very strange surgery. They spent the entire first day just cleaning. They didn't sweep. They excavated. Anya and her apprentice, wearing knee pads and what looked like surgical loops, spent hours meticulously cleaning every grain of dirt and debris from every single crack. They used the dental picks to scrape away stubborn particles and the air compressor to blow the dust away with surgical precision. They treated my driveway not like a slab of concrete, but like a priceless Ming vase they were preparing to restore. My neighbor, Barry, A well-meaning but incurably nosy guy who spent most of his retirement monitoring the neighborhood from his living room window was immediately intrigued. I saw his curtains twitching all morning. By lunchtime, he couldn't take it anymore. He ambled over, clutching his morning paper like a shield. "Hey, Leo?" he said, squinting at Anya, who was now carefully applying a dark, viscous liquid into a hairline crack with a tiny spatula. "Got a little situation there?" "Just some minor repairs, Barry," I said cheerfully. "Aesthetic upgrades. The HOA insisted." Right, he said, nodding, though his eyes were wide with confusion. "Looks sticky. You sure you don't want my guy Dave's number? He does a great re-pour. Poured my whole patio last year. Solid as a rock." "Thanks, Barry, but I'm exploring a more bespoke solution," I said, enjoying the word. "Bespoke, huh?" He watched Anya work for another minute. "Is she painting them?" "In a manner of speaking. It's a special kind of lacquer, very durable." Barry grunted, clearly unconvinced, and retreated back to the safety of his own perfectly normal driveway. I could feel his bewildered gaze on my back for the rest of the day. The cleaning and lacquering process took 3 full days. 3 days of my neighbors slowing their cars as they drove by, their faces a mixture of pity and morbid curiosity. I imagined the texts flying around the neighborhood group chat. "Does anyone know what's happening at Leo's place? He has 2 people in black kneeling on his driveway. Looks like a very specific, very tedious cult." Then, on Thursday morning, the gold came out. It wasn't a bucket of paint. It was a small, velvet-lined box. Inside were books of 23-karat gold leaf, tissue-thin sheets of shimmering metal that seemed to float on the air. Anya mixed a fine gold powder into another batch of the clear lacquer, creating a molten, honey-colored paste. With a brush even finer than the ones she'd used before, she began to trace the lines of the black lacquer that now filled the cracks. It was subtle at first, a single, glittering thread snaking its way from the curb towards the garage. But then the morning sun crested the roof of my house and hit it. The effect was instantaneous and breathtaking. The thin line of gold ignited, blazing with a light that was impossible to ignore. It was a vein of pure sunshine embedded in the dull gray. Anya and her apprentice worked with silent efficiency, and by midday, a small network of golden lines had spread across the concrete. It was bizarre. It was audacious. It was the most beautiful and ridiculous thing I had ever seen. Barry came back over, this time without his newspaper. His jaw was hanging open. "Leo," he whispered, as if he were in a church. Is that gold?" 23 karat, Barry," I said, taking a sip of my lemonade. "Only the best for the Harmony Meadows community standards of excellence." Just then I saw it. The pristine white SUV, Brenda's mobile throne. It was cruising down the street at a speed usually reserved for funeral processions. It slowed to a crawl in front of my house. I could see her silhouette behind the wheel, her head slowly turning. She stopped for a full 10 seconds, the engine humming ominously. I gave her a jaunty little wave. The SUV didn't move. Then, with a squeal of tires that was entirely out of character for our quiet street, it sped off. The look on her face, even through the tinted glass, had been a perfect cocktail of confusion, horror, and incandescent rage. It was the face of a woman who just found out her prize-winning poodle has eloped with a squirrel. It was glorious. I knew she wouldn't just drive away. That wasn't her style. 10 minutes later, my prediction came true. Her front door slammed shut with a crack that echoed down the street. She began marching across her perfect lawn, then across the asphalt no man's land, and then onto my property. She was clutching her HOA binder to her chest like a shield, her face set in a grim mask of righteous indignation. "Leo," she said, her voice tight and strained. She didn't even say hello. She just stopped at the edge of the driveway, gesturing at it as if it were a dead body. "What, in the name of Harmony Meadows, is that?" "That, Brenda," I said, putting my lemonade down with deliberate calm, "is me rectifying the situation, as per your lovely letter. You said my driveway had fissures. These are the fissures. They are now being filled." Her eyes narrowed to tiny slits. With glitter," she spat, the word dripping with disdain. Before I could answer, Anya, who had been silently working this whole time, stood up. She looked at Brenda, her expression utterly placid. "It is 23-carat gold, madam," she said, her voice as calm and cool as a river stone. "A tribute to the resilience of the substrate. We are celebrating its imperfections, not hiding them." Brenda was so taken aback by Anya's sudden philosophical interjection that she actually sputtered. "Substrate? Resilience? This is a violation of..." She fumbled with her binder, flipping through pages furiously. "I'm sure it's a violation of something. The bylaws clearly state all repairs must be of a conventional and unobtrusive nature. This is the opposite of unobtrusive." "Is it?" I asked, feigning innocence. "It seems pretty conventional to me. There's a crack, I'm filling it, just with, slightly nicer materials." "Show me the page, Brenda. Show me the bylaw that specifies the exact chemical composition of approved crack filler. I'll wait." She stared at me, her mouth opening and closing like a fish. She was beaten, for now, and she knew it. She had no specific bylaw to weaponize. Her face turned a shade of red that clashed horribly with her beige pantsuit. "This is not over, Leo," she hissed. "I'm calling an emergency meeting of the board. There will be fines. There will be special assessments. You will regret this." She turned on her heel and marched back to her beige fortress, the binder clutched so tightly her knuckles were white. The war had officially gone hot, and it was starting to get very, very expensive. Brenda was a woman of her word. The next afternoon, as Anya was meticulously gilding a particularly complex web of cracks near my front steps, a police car rolled slowly down Blossom Lane and pulled up to the curb. My heart did a little tap dance against my ribs. It's one thing to wage a cold war with your HOA president. It's another thing entirely to have the actual law show up at your house because your driveway is too fabulous. 2 officers got out. The first was older, with a weary face that suggested he'd seen every form of human foolishness and was profoundly tired of it all. His name tag read, Miller. The second officer was young, sharp, and looked like he ironed the creases in his uniform with a laser. His name tag read, Kintsugi. Miller approached me, his hand resting casually on his belt. "Afternoon, sir," he said, his voice a gravelly monotone. "We got a call about a disturbance?" He glanced at Anya kneeling on the driveway, then back at me, his eyebrows raising a fraction of an inch. "Said someone was vandalizing property." "Disturbance? Vandalism?" I replied, spreading my hands in a gesture of pure innocence. "Officer, this is a place of peace and artistic expression. I'm just repairing my driveway." Kintsugi, the younger cop, had walked over to the driveway and was squatting down, peering at one of the golden lines. He looked utterly bewildered. "Sir," he said, looking up at me with wide eyes. Is that real gold?" "Only the best for the Harmony Meadows aesthetic, officer," I said with a straight face. "It's all part of my curb appeal optimization." I heard Miller mutter something to Kintsugi under his breath. It sounded like, "Just run his name. Make sure he's not wanted for robbing Fort Knox." He then turned his full, tired attention back to me. "Look, sir," he said, sighing heavily. "Let me get this straight. This is your house? Last I checked the mortgage statements, yes. And this is your driveway? It is. And you are paying this woman," he gestured to the serenely working Anya, "to put gold into the cracks of your driveway?" "Diligently and with great enthusiasm," I confirmed. Miller took his hat off and ran a hand through his thinning hair. He looked at me. He looked at the driveway. He looked up at the sky as if pleading for divine intervention. "Well," he finally said, putting his hat back on, "there's no law against having a tacky driveway, as far as I know." He turned to his partner. "Kintsugi, we're done here." "But Sarge, the glare," Kintsugi started, clearly trying to find some angle. "It's concrete, son. It's not a public nuisance unless he's aiming mirrors at passing airplanes. Let's go. There's probably an actual crime happening somewhere." As they walked back to their car, I saw Kintsugi sneak his phone out and snap a quick, sneaky picture of the driveway. Miller just shook his head the entire way. The patrol car pulled away, leaving a stunned silence in its wake. Round 2 to me, but the police showing up was just the beginning. The incident had been witnessed by several neighbors, including a teenager down the street named Josh, who had the social media instincts of a seasoned marketing executive. Less than an hour later, Barry from next door called me, his voice breathless. Leo, you're on the internet." "What are you talking about, Barry?" "My granddaughter just showed me. On the Instagram. The picture that young Kintsugi boy took, the cop. No, wait, it's from the Johnson kid down the street. Just look." My phone was already buzzing. I opened Instagram. There it was. A picture of my driveway, shimmering in the sun, with the police car in the background. The caption read, "My neighbor is fighting his HOA with gold. A true American hero. Hashtag Golden Driveway Guy. Hashtag HOA Wars. Not petty revenge." It had hundreds of likes. It was being shared. I scrolled through the comments. This is the level of petty I aspire to. Not all heroes wear capes. My HOA would literally combust. The hashtag #Golden Driveway Guy was starting to gain traction. A local blog that specialized in quirky city stories picked it up. By evening, the story was on the homepage of the local news website. My quiet little suburban rebellion was no longer quiet. The next morning, it got worse. Or better, depending on your perspective. A van from the local Channel 8 News pulled up. A reporter with impossibly white teeth and hair that defied gravity bounced out, followed by a world-weary cameraman. "Hi," she chirped, sticking a microphone in my face. "Tiffany Sparks, Channel 8 News. Are you the Golden Driveway Guy?" I was, it seemed, the Golden Driveway Guy. What followed was a media circus on my front lawn. Tiffany interviewed everyone she could find. My interview was a masterclass in sarcastic folk heroism. "When the world gives you cracks, Tiffany, you make them fabulous," I said, leaning against my mailbox. "It's about finding beauty in the imperfections. Also, it really, really annoys Brenda." Anya, to her credit, was an even better interview. She gave Tiffany a profound, deadpan soundbite about Japanese philosophy that left the perky reporter completely mystified. "The concrete remembers its own liquid past," Anya stated calmly to the camera. "The gold is simply helping it write its future memoir." Of course, Brenda couldn't resist the spotlight. She saw the camera crew from her window and emerged like a moth to a flame of righteous anger. She marched over, adjusting her sensible cardigan, and launched into a tirade. "This is a flagrant disregard for community standards," she declared into the microphone. "It causes a dangerous glare when the sun hits it. It will bring down property values. It's a distraction to drivers. Think of the children." The cameraman dutifully panned over to a group of neighborhood kids who were sitting on the curb, staring at the driveway with expressions of pure awe. The final interview was the best. Tiffany cornered Barry as he was getting his mail. "Sir, you're his next-door neighbor. What do you think of this golden driveway?" Barry adjusted his glasses. "Well, I don't know," he said, scratching his chin thoughtfully. "At first I thought he was nuts, but it's kind of famous now, ain't it? People are coming to see it. Our boring little street is finally on the map." He leaned closer to the mic, as if sharing a secret. "It's got pizzazz." The news story aired that night. My phone exploded. The neighborhood was officially, irrevocably divided. The Harmony Meadows Facebook group, normally a sleepy place for discussing lost cats and recommending plumbers, descended into a digital civil war. It was Team Leo versus Team Brenda. Someone put a handmade sign on their lawn: "We support the golden driveway." The next morning it was joined by another: Harmony Meadows, not Gaudy Meadows. Someone filed an anonymous complaint with the HOA about the signs. The entire cul-de-sac had become a battleground of passive-aggressive lawn decor. My ridiculous, shiny act of defiance had turned into a full-blown community crisis. And the final showdown was yet to come. The summons arrived on a Friday afternoon, delivered with the grim finality of a death sentence. It wasn't a beige envelope this time. It was a stark white notice, taped to every front door in the neighborhood with an aggressive amount of packing tape. Official notice: Emergency HOA meeting. Date: Tuesday, October 7th. Time: 7:00 p.m. Sharp. Location: Harmony Meadows Community Clubhouse. Agenda Item Number 1. Discussion and vote on sanction and remediation regarding unsanctioned and non-conforming driveway surface at 124 Blossom Lane, the Gold property. She had put gold in quotes. The sheer, unadulterated passive aggression of it was almost impressive. This wasn't just a meeting. This was a trial, a public shaming. And I was pretty sure Brenda had already polished the guillotine and was measuring my neck for a clean drop. The days leading up to the meeting were tense. People who used to wave now just gave tight, awkward nods. I could feel eyes on me whenever I went to get the mail. Team Brenda was emboldened, their faces set with grim determination. Team Leo was smaller but more spirited, giving me thumbs-ups and mouthed words of encouragement from across the street. When Tuesday night arrived, I put on a clean shirt, took a deep breath, and walked over to the clubhouse. The room was already packed. It was a sterile, soulless place with beige walls, fluorescent lights that hummed menacingly, and rows of uncomfortable metal folding chairs. The air was thick with tension, and the smell of stale coffee and suburban anxiety. As I walked in, a hush fell over the room. Every head turned. It was like a scene from a Western, only instead of cowboys, it was middle-aged people in sensible shoes. I found an empty chair in the back and sat down. Anya had offered to come as a character witness or an artistic consultant, but I told her it was better if I faced the firing squad alone. Brenda stood at a flimsy podium at the front of the room, looking triumphant. Beside her was a projector screen. She was armed with a PowerPoint presentation. My heart sank. No one who is on the side of joy and reason has ever used a PowerPoint presentation at an HOA meeting. "Thank you all for coming on such short notice," she began, her voice dripping with false sincerity. "As you know, we are here to discuss a serious breach of our community's aesthetic covenant." Click. The first slide appeared. It was a grainy, zoomed-in photo of a crack in my driveway. Pre-gold. A big red circle was drawn around it. Click. The next slide. A picture of a good driveway. A smooth, gray, featureless expanse belonging to one of the board members. "Our bylaws are the bedrock of our community," Brenda intoned, clicking through slides showing terrifying walls of text from the HOA binder. "They protect our property values. They ensure a harmonious, uniform appearance that we can all be proud of." Click. The screen showed a photo of my driveway in its current, golden state, taken on a cloudy day to make it look as dreary as possible. And then there is this. A murmur went through the crowd. "This spectacle is a mockery of our rules. It is garish. It is distracting. It is, frankly, an embarrassment." She went on for 20 minutes, her voice rising with righteous fury. She had charts showing potential dips in property values based on aesthetic anomalies. She had graphs illustrating the reflective index of gold versus standard concrete. She had testimonials from anonymous neighbors complaining about the glare. "And if we allow this to stand," she concluded, her eyes sweeping the room, "what is next? Driveways painted like rainbows? Lawns replaced with baldin? Pits? Flamingos on every lawn? We will be the laughingstock of the entire Tri-County area. The board proposes an immediate Tier 4 fine of $5,000, plus a mandatory order for the resident to have the driveway professionally resurfaced to community standards within 14 days, at his own expense." She finished, looking smug, and opened the floor to comments. An elderly man in the front row stood up. "The glare really is quite bad in the afternoon," he grumbled. "Shines right into my living room." A young woman who I knew had just moved in stood up, wringing her hands. "We just bought our house. We're worried about what this will do to the resale value. We moved here for the, consistent look." My heart sank lower. It wasn't looking good. Brenda's fear-mongering was working. Then a voice from the middle of the room piped up. It was Barry. He stood up slowly, clutching the back of the chair in front of him. "You know," he started, his voice a little shaky but clear. "At first I thought he was nuts, I really did. My wife said, 'Barry, what on earth is Leo doing now?' But a funny thing happened. People started coming to see it." He looked around the room. "My granddaughter brought her friends from college to take a picture with it. The news came. People are talking about Harmony Meadows for the first time ever, and they're not saying it's boring. They're saying it's the place with the cool gold driveway." He shrugged. "I don't know. Maybe a little pizzazz ain't the worst thing in the world." A few people murmured in agreement. The teenager, Josh, who had made the first viral post, stood up. "It's his property, right? It's like art. It's freedom of expression." Brenda's face was turning crimson. "This is not about art. It's about rules." Finally, she pointed a finger at me. "Leo, do you have anything to say for yourself?" The room went silent again. I stood up. My hands were sweating. I hadn't prepared a speech. I just looked at all the faces staring at me. Some hostile, some curious, some friendly. "Yeah," I said, my voice coming out stronger than I expected. "I do. I walked to the front of the room, standing a few feet away from Brenda's podium. Look, I'm not going to show you a PowerPoint. I'm just going to talk. A few weeks ago, I got a letter. It was beige. It said my driveway was ugly. It was cracked. It was imperfect. And you know what? It was. I paused, looking at my neighbors. That big crack by the garage? That happened during the ice storm of '09. My wife and I were out there for an hour trying to chip the ice away so she could get to her nursing shift at the hospital. The little web of cracks by the door? That's where my daughter Chloe fell off her bike the first time she tried to ride without training wheels. She cried for 20 minutes, but she got right back on. That dark stain over there? That's from a frozen pizza I dropped last summer during a barbecue. We all laughed our heads off. My driveway isn't just a slab of concrete, I continued, my voice getting thicker with emotion. It's the story of my family living in this house. In this neighborhood, your letter, Brenda, told me to hide that story, to pave it over with gray, boring, harmonious concrete because the imperfections were unsightly. I decided not to. I decided to take the broken parts, the messy parts, the imperfect parts, and make them the best parts. I filled them with gold. I made them shine. Maybe that's a better definition of harmony than making sure everything is the exact same shade of beige. I let the words hang in the air. The room was dead silent. I could see something shifting in people's faces. Understanding. Empathy. Brenda, seeing she was losing the room, banged her gavel. This is all very sentimental, but it's not relevant. We need to vote. All in favor of the fine and mandatory remediation order. She raised her hand high, along with the other 3 board members. A smattering of other hands went up around the room. I counted maybe 15. All opposed? Slowly at first, and then with more confidence, hands started going up. Barry's hand shot up. Josh's. The young couple who had been worried about resale value looked at each other, and then the husband slowly raised his hand. More hands followed. I counted quickly. 20, 25, 28. It was over. I had won. The look on Brenda's face was one of pure, unadulterated shock. Her perfect, orderly world had crumbled. The vote had failed. Her reign of beige terror was over. The meeting dissolved into chatter as she stood, speechless, at the podium. I had faced the dragon in its lair, and somehow I had won. The aftermath of the meeting was immediate and decisive. As the residents filed out of the clubhouse, a new atmosphere settled over the neighborhood. People who had been avoiding my gaze were now patting me on the back, shaking my hand. "Great speech, Leo," one of them said. "Never thought of a driveway like that before." Barry clapped me on the shoulder with the force of a proud father. "Told ya," he boomed. "Pizzazz!" Brenda didn't say a word. She just packed up her projector and her binder of broken dreams, her face a pale mask of defeat. She walked out of the clubhouse without looking at anyone, a general retreating from a battle she was certain she would win. The following week, the ultimate white flag appeared. A for sale sign was hammered into Brenda's perfect emerald green lawn. Apparently, a community that embraced imperfection was no longer a community she wished to be a part of. The neighborhood collectively breathed a sigh of relief. A few days later, Anya came to apply the final touches to the driveway. The project, which had been on hold pending the HOA verdict, could finally be completed. She worked with her usual serene focus, applying a final, clear sealant that would protect the gold and the concrete from the elements. When she was finished, she stood back, and I stood beside her. We looked at the finished masterpiece. The entire driveway was now a breathtaking web of glittering gold lines on dark gray concrete. It was a chaotic, beautiful map of its own history. In the late afternoon sun, it didn't just glare. It glowed, casting a warm, golden light onto the front of the house. It was absurd. It was over the top. And it was undeniably, stunningly beautiful. "It is complete," Anya said, her voice holding a rare note of satisfaction. "The driveway has accepted its new form. Its story is now visible to all." "We did it, Anya," I said, a real non-sarcastic smile on my face. "We really annoyed a lot of people with art." "That is often a sign of important work," she replied, a tiny smile playing on her own lips. "You have created wabi-sabi on asphalt. Be proud." I wrote her the final check. The number still made my eyes water, but as I handed it to her, I felt no regret. It was the price of freedom, the cost of telling my own story. We shook hands, two unlikely co-conspirators who had pulled off the most ridiculous, wonderful home improvement project in history. Life on Blossom Lane entered a new, golden age. My house became a local landmark. People still drove by, but now they did it with a sense of wonder, not confusion. Teenagers came to take selfies for their Instagrams. An art student from the local community college asked if she could set up an easel on the sidewalk and paint it. I said yes. Barry, inspired by my success, attempted to fix a crack in his own walkway with a tube of super glue and a jar of craft store glitter. The result was a sticky, lumpy, tragic mess that attracted a startling number of ants. He sheepishly asked for Anya's number. The family that moved into Brenda's old house was a young couple with 2 kids. The day they moved in, the woman came over with a plate of brownies. "You must be Leo," she said, her eyes wide with excitement. "The golden driveway guy! We're huge fans. Your driveway is actually one of the reasons we bought this house. We figured this must be a pretty cool neighborhood." It was. It had become a neighborhood with a story. A place where a crack wasn't something to be hidden, but something to be celebrated. Months passed. Autumn leaves fell, their reds and yellows a perfect complement to the gold in my driveway. One Saturday morning, I was sitting on my porch, drinking a coffee, watching the light play across the golden veins. A delivery truck pulled up and dropped off a package. It wasn't a bill. It wasn't a beige envelope. It was a thick, heavy, glossy magazine. I opened the package. It was the latest issue of Modern Architectural Digest. A friend of a friend, a photographer, had submitted the story. I flipped through the pages, and there it was. A 6-page photo spread titled "Subversive Suburbia, Finding Beauty in the Broken." There was a full-page stunning photo of my driveway at sunset, glowing as if lit from within. I read the article, which quoted Anya's philosophical musings and my own sarcastic ones. It talked about community, conformity, and the rebellious power of art in unexpected places. They said my driveway was too cracked. They said it was an eyesore. They said it violated the harmony of the neighborhood. And they were right. It is cracked. It is imperfect. It's a testament to harsh winters, clumsy kids, and dropped pizzas. But now, when the sun hits it just right, it shines. I took a sip of my coffee and smiled, looking out at my ridiculous, beautiful, expensive, and utterly perfect driveway. And you know what? I think it's the most harmonious damn thing I've ever seen.